across Canada and the US, sparking intense political debate, media frenzy, and public curiosity. Frustrations over federal policies, economic concerns, and cultural differences have long fueled separatist sentiments in Alberta. But this is the first formal step toward American statehood. From oil-rich independence dreams to calls for greater autonomy, Alberta's move could reshape the political landscape of North America. Is this the beginning of a new chapter, or just a high-stakes bluff? It's official. Alberta just made the most aggressive political move in Canadian history. At a press conference in Edmonton this morning, provincial leaders announced their intention to begin the process of separating from Canada, with the goal of becoming the 51st state of the United States. The statement wasn't vague. It included legal steps, proposed timelines, and even a draft referendum question. Within minutes, headlines spread across North America. Ottawa called it irresponsible. Washington said it's monitoring the situation. Social media exploded. Supporters hailed it as Alberta's path to freedom. Critics called it national suicide. But one thing is clear. This isn't a joke, and it's not just a headline. Alberta is done waiting, and it's making its move. This announcement didn't come out of nowhere. Alberta has been drifting from the rest of Canada for years. At the core of the divide is energy. Alberta produces more oil and gas than any other province, yet faces constant restrictions from Ottawa. Pipeline projects get delayed or canceled. Carbon taxes hit local industries hard. And through equalization payments, Alberta sends billions to other provinces, while its own economy struggles. The result? Deep resentment. Many Albertans feel that the federal government doesn't represent them. Politically, they lean more conservative than most of Canada. Economically, they prioritize resource development over regulation. Culturally, they often feel more American than Canadian. That's how Wexit was born, a Western separatist movement that started small but grew louder after repeated political clashes, especially during Liberal governments. Polls over the past decade have shown a steady rise in support for either full independence or significantly more autonomy. And while mainstream politicians dismissed it for years, that's no longer an option. This announcement marks the first time those frustrations have turned into formal action. Many in Alberta have long felt disconnected from the federal government, especially over issues like resource management, taxation, and provincial autonomy. By seeking to join the United States, Alberta hopes to regain control over its future, focusing on economic prosperity and political freedom. The declaration has sparked heated debates, with proponents championing it as a path to self-determination, while critics fear the loss of Canadian sovereignty. In this script, we'll explore the reasons behind this drastic step. Alberta's message is clear. If Ottawa won't listen, it's time to talk to someone who will, even if that someone is south of the border. Alberta isn't just leaving Canada, it's looking south, with a plan. The official statement confirmed that Alberta's leadership has already initiated contact with U.S. lawmakers, and according to insiders, discussions have taken place with members of the Republican Party, including close allies of former President Donald Trump. One source claims a preliminary meeting between Alberta officials and Trump himself took place in late June at Mar-a-Lago. While not confirmed publicly, both sides reportedly discussed trade alignment, energy policy, and border logistics. Why Trump? Because many Albertans see him as a symbol of what they want: low taxes, energy dominance, and a government that gets out of the way. The idea isn't new. Alberta's economy resembles states like Texas, Oklahoma, and North Dakota. Resource-heavy, business-friendly, and socially conservative. Becoming part of the U.S. would mean fewer federal barriers, access to a bigger energy market, and a stronger geopolitical position. There's also the cultural alignment, gun rights, skepticism of big government, and a distrust of Eastern elites. Those themes run deep in Alberta and resonate with large segments of American voters. Joining the U.S. may sound extreme, but to some Albertans, it sounds like finally joining a country that reflects their values and rewards their contribution. Has been one of tension and negotiation since its entry into the Confederation in 1905. Initially, Alberta's provincial status was shaped by economic dependence on agriculture and natural resources. But over time, the provincial government began to feel the weight of federal control, especially in relation to the oil and gas industry. Alberta's vast energy resources have consistently put it at odds with federal policies, especially during the oil crises and environmental regulations imposed by Ottawa. The province has felt sidelined in many key national decisions, from climate change initiatives to the handling of the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion. These growing frustrations culminated in a desire for greater autonomy, and the statehood movement has been fueled by years of unresolved grievances with the federal government's approach to regional interests. The big question isn't just why Alberta wants to join the US, it's can they? The short answer, it's complicated, but not impossible. Under Canadian law, provinces don't have a legal right to unilaterally separate. But after the 1995 Quebec referendum, Canada passed the Clarity Act, which outlines how a province could begin the process, starting with a clear referendum result and followed by negotiations with the federal government. In other words, Alberta can't just walk away. But if a strong majority of voters support separation, Ottawa would be under serious pressure to respond. And Alberta seems prepared. Officials say a referendum could be held within 18 months. If passed, it would trigger a constitutional crisis, forcing talks not just about separation, but about everything from borders to debt to citizenship. On the US side, things are different. Article 4 of the US Constitution gives Congress the power to admit new states. Historically, it has happened multiple times, most notably with Texas, which joined after being an independent republic. If Alberta were to separate and request admission, it would need approval from both houses of Congress and the president. Would that happen? That depends on the politics. A Republican-controlled Congress might welcome Alberta's energy and political leanings. A Democratic Congress might resist adding another red-leaning state, where Alberta felt its interests were sacrificed for broader national objectives. The idea of Alberta becoming a U.S. state has emerged as a potential solution to this political disconnect, offering the province a chance to align with a government that may be more attuned to its economic interests and values. The move represents a cry for greater self-determination and an end to perceived political marginalization.
Well, 65% of Albertans and 65% of Saskatchewan residents voted for the Conservatives. So they wanted the Conservative vision. I think the Conservatives have more credibility when they talk about energy development. And I think we need to be perfectly frank. It was a major pivot on the part of the Liberals to launch their campaign by ending the carbon tax, which has been one of the policies that has not only exacerbated the differences between our regions, but has also been a huge problem from an affordability point of view. So I think I hope what the Prime Minister takes away from this election.
Bottom line, there's no rule that guarantees this move can happen. But there's also nothing that fully blocks it, especially if both sides are motivated. And right now, Alberta's never been more motivated. As expected, Alberta's announcement has drawn a hard line between supporters and opponents. Across Canada and deep into the US inside Alberta, several key political players have signaled quiet approval. Premier Danielle Smith didn't directly endorse the separation plan, but in her response to the press, she stated Alberta has every right to explore all sovereign options. Her language was careful, but calculated. Multiple members of her United Conservative Party, including high-ranking cabinet ministers, have voiced full support, arguing that Alberta has been economically punished and politically ignored for too long. Outside the legislature, the Maverick Party, a federal-level Western separatist group, declared the announcement the beginning of Alberta's future. Their leadership claims to be in active talks with legal teams and U.S. contacts to facilitate next steps. There's also growing support from Alberta's oil and gas industry. CEOs from multiple Calgary-based firms released a joint statement saying they welcome any path that puts Alberta's energy in global markets without political obstruction. Translation, they're on board, especially if it means fewer carbon restrictions. But not everyone is cheering.
The support isn't just growing, it's boiling. A May 2025 Angus Reid poll says 37% of Albertans are now on board with leaving Canada altogether. That's not a little protest, it's over 1/3 of the entire province. But hold on, it gets spicier. Among UCP voters, that number skyrockets to 65%. So yeah, if you're in Danielle Smith's camp, you're probably halfway out the door already. The base isn't just restless, they're literally organizing the move.
Protests erupted in downtown Edmonton and Calgary the same day, organized largely by student groups, labor unions, and Indigenous advocates, demonstrators warned that the move could dismantle public services and erase treaties. Alberta's First Nations leadership remains largely opposed, with some chiefs stating they were never consulted. Nationally, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau called the move irresponsible and illegal, while Jagmeet Singh of the NDP labeled it political blackmail. Quebec Premier François Legault warned it sets a dangerous precedent. In the U.S., Senator Josh Hawley, Rep. Marjorie Taylor Greene, and Governor Greg Abbott all expressed interest in welcoming Alberta, framing it as an energy alliance. Whether it succeeds or fails, this movement now has powerful allies and determined enemies. Let's say the unthinkable happens. The referendum passes. Ottawa fails to stop it, and Washington says yes. What does it actually look like if Alberta joins the United States? First, Alberta becomes the 51st state. That means a new star on the U.S. flag, a new seat in Congress, and a complete overhaul of its legal and economic systems.
And what's Alberta gotten in return? Lecture after lecture from politicians who wouldn't know Fort McMurray from a parking lot.
Alberta would adopt U.S. dollars, shift to American tax codes, and likely privatize much of its public healthcare system. Canada's single-payer health model would be replaced by insurance-based care, one of the most controversial trade-offs. The Canadian Mounties, gone. In their place, state police departments, possibly aligned with U.S. federal agencies. Alberta would have its own National Guard. Its education system would also shift. Standardized U.S. curricula, American university funding models, and even school prayer debates. But the biggest changes would be economic and geopolitical. As part of the U.S., Alberta's oil and gas could flow south without interference. No federal carbon tax, no interprovincial bottlenecks. Refineries in Texas, Louisiana, and the Midwest would gain direct access. Alberta's energy sector could explode in size. There are downsides. Alberta would lose Canadian pension protections. Trade with Canada could become more difficult. Families split across the border would face new immigration rules. Indigenous land claims would fall under U.S. federal jurisdiction, creating a new legal mess. And for Canada, the shock would be enormous. Losing Alberta would mean losing one of its economic engines and a large piece of its national identity. If this goes through, the continent changes forever. Not everyone believes Alberta actually intends to go through with it. Some political analysts say this is a high-level bluff, a pressure tactic aimed at Ottawa. The timing isn't accidental. Alberta is locked in tense negotiations over carbon policy, pipeline access, and equalization payments. Threatening separation grabs attention and forces the federal government to take Alberta's demands seriously. The strategy mirrors Quebec's past referenda. In both 1980 and 1995, Quebec used the threat of independence to win concessions from Ottawa. More autonomy, more language protections, more control over immigration. Alberta may be aiming for the same result, just with different priorities: energy, taxation, and political recognition. But even if it is a bluff, it still matters. You don't threaten to leave your country unless something is deeply broken. And for many Albertans, the frustration isn't performative. It's real. They believe the national system doesn't work for them, that their resources are exploited, their voices ignored, and their values sidelined.
But we're not done. Smith wants to scrap the carbon tax, the electric vehicle mandate, and the oil and gas emissions cap. Why? Because nobody in Alberta is buying 200,000 Teslas a year. That's Ottawa's pipe dream, not Alberta's reality. Then there's the demand to reclaim carbon tax revenues, which currently vanish into Ottawa's black hole of mismanagement. Alberta wants to use that money for, actual problems, not glossy press releases.
That kind of resentment doesn't vanish when a press cycle ends. Even if Alberta doesn't follow through, this announcement moves the needle. It normalizes the idea that leaving is an option. It forces Canada to ask hard questions about federalism, fairness, and unity. Because whether it's symbolic or serious, Alberta just lit a fire no one can ignore. Whether Alberta follows through or not, the damage and the momentum is already real. Canada now faces a question it hasn't confronted in a generation. What holds this country together? And for the United States, the idea of expanding northward, once unthinkable, is now on the table, at least in conversation. Political lines are blurring, alliances are shifting, and energy is becoming more powerful than borders. Alberta's announcement isn't just about one province. It's about the future of two nations. Because if Alberta walks away, it won't be the last. Should Alberta become the 51st state? Would this fix decades of frustration, or just create new problems on both sides of the border? Let us know in the comments. And if you want to understand how Quebec nearly split from Canada twice, check out our next video. Because Alberta might be first, but it's not alone.